Thank you very much, Manoa. Once again, good afternoon, everybody. Mine is to say that, as the speaker has said, I think this is a day where we as Kenyans are turning a new leaf, where we as Kenyans have come together and agreed that on issues that face us as a nation, critical issues that threaten us as a nation, be it terrorism, be it the issue of corruption, that we will come together and fight the battle together. Indeed, as has been said, this is not a battle that can be won by any singular individual, any singular sector, but it must be multifaceted in how we approach it. And I think today marks that new beginning. I want to begin by, first of all, thanking the private sector who have worked in conjunction with ourselves to come up with the various recommendations that they have made, which will be made public to you, and to give them my assurance that my government will implement those recommendations to the very last letter. That we shall do. Let me also thank the various arms of government that have also come together to deal with some of the inadequacies in our system that help or that prevent us from dealing with this particular threat. I am very happy as to what has happened in the course of the last couple of weeks, where we have seen greater cooperation, greater collaboration between the various agencies. And indeed, it is my hope that as a result of that greater collaboration, we should be able to see very clear results coming out and cases being successfully prosecuted, and those who have committed crimes be held to account in accordance with our desire as a people and as a nation. So for that I am grateful, and I want to continue to encourage all of us, arms of government, government departments and agencies, to continue to focus towards that particular end. I think we have also made it clear that the private sector must play their role as well. For every taker, there is a giver. And as we heard last week, 70% of corruption in our country is basically in the procurement department. And the procurement department involves none other, because government does not do business with itself, it does business with the private sector. So there too we must agree that we need to work together. We have agreed that religious leaders must also come on board in this particular battle. They must come on board in terms of encouraging correct values and virtues amongst our citizens. They must come forward also in battling with issues of corruption within the religious sector as well, because none of us can claim to be clean in this battle. We have also agreed that the media has a role. The media has a role in joining us and in highlighting areas of corruption, but they must also be accountable and give us evidence, or give the relevant agencies the evidence required to prosecute a case, because you cannot claim corruption unless you have evidence, and you cannot prosecute corruption unless that evidence is produced to the relevant authorities, who then can conclude investigations, create and have a prosecutable case, which is then handed over to the purveyors of justice to make their ruling and decision and ultimately punish the offender. So everybody, every single one of us has a role if we are to succeed. I think with that general introduction, I would like to say just a few points of what has been agreed. Excuse me, it's a bit long, but I think it's necessary for me to just go through it all. We have agreed that every company from henceforth seeking to work with government, both at the national and county level, will have to sign an approved business code of ethics domiciled in the Public Procurement Oversight Agency. And as of today, I have directed my Cabinet Secretary to the National Treasury to give this code effect through regulations under the Public Procurement and Disposal Act. We have agreed also that any business that fails to comply with the code will be disqualified from doing business with government for a period of not less than 5 years, and that information will be made public. And for clarity, we have said that this disqualification will not only apply to the business entity, but also to the directors of those companies. It has also been agreed that companies and their officials guilty of breaching the code will further be delisted from all business associations, and I call upon the business associations to comply with this requirement. And in this regard, the government will not engage in business with companies with blacklisted members. The government also, we have stated that accounting officers and AIE holders and supply chain officers will be held personally liable for doing any government business with blacklisted companies. We have also agreed that the private sector is spearheading a national values campaign under the Mkenya Daima banner, which is focused on national values and encouraging every person to not only embrace their rights, but to pay a greater mind to their responsibilities. The campaign will also target corruption as being shameful and dishonorable, as is those who practice it. I assure the private sector today of my support and that of my government in this endeavor. I am personally also determined to bring back the spirit of selfless service, and senior officers must exhibit the highest standards of ethical behavior and lead by example as is required of them under Chapter 6 of our Constitution. And as of today, I direct the Inspector General to enforce this requirement without fear or favor. Kenyans know that the delay in providing services creates an environment where bribery thrives. Therefore, introducing penalties in performance contracts and tying each department and agency to timelines given in service charters. In addition, service delivery institutions will identify services which can be offered faster at an additional cost. And to this end, I am directing the head of public service to enforce this. Also, with a view to ensure that values are being taught at every level of our education system, I've also directed that the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, as well as all related bodies, expedite the work of mainstreaming ethics and integrity awareness in the public and private education curriculum, with a clear target of it being applicable and examinable in the next academic year. We will also take this opportunity to urge the religious leaders in our country to declare corruption a sin against God and humanity. For government, we are also introducing compulsory and continuous ethics and integrity training across all levels of public service, and I will insist on holding the most senior officials to a very high standard of conduct. With regard to the rule of law, as you have heard, we have received the proposed bribery bill, and this bill will focus on the supply side of corruption and on those who give bribes to induce public officials. Amongst other measures, it will also penalize the failure by the commercial sector to prevent bribery, and today I direct the Attorney General to begin the process of passing this into law as soon as possible. We have also signed mutual legal aid agreements with a number of countries that have committed to identify and to deal in their jurisdictions with illicit wealth acquired in Kenya, and we look to signing more such agreements and to follow them up for implementation. And towards that end, we also want to become stronger players in the diplomatic area in encouraging actions that promote global financial integrity, for we must make the world as inhospitable for corruption as it is for terrorism financing. And I urge all our partners to enact similar laws, because we know that bribery knows no boundaries, and we are grateful today to have the British High Commissioner join us at this session, showing their own commitment in supporting us in this particular fight. I am also directing that the Attorney General to complete the works with all stakeholders to quickly enact a whistleblower protection legislation that will ensure that those who come forward with information on corrupt practices are protected. We have met with the Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, as well as with the head of the Financial Reporting Center, to discuss and agree with them how we can ensure that the banking system is not used to launder the proceeds of theft and fraud. And from today, we have agreed that those banks that break our anti-money laundering laws and regulations will, at a minimum, lose their banking license. But it shall not just end there. The directors and senior officials of such banks are now on notice that they will be pursued relentlessly, individually and collectively, in accordance with the law, should they succumb to the lure of breaking our anti-money laundering laws and regulations. And finally, the Central Bank and the Financial Reporting Center are, as a matter of urgency, strengthening their supervision capabilities over all banking institutions. We have also held discussions with the Honorable Chief Justice, and he has committed to work with through the National Council of Administrative Justice to actualize fast-tracking prosecution of corruption and economic crimes as envisioned in the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act. And he has also assured all of us that he will be making every effort to ensure the speedy setting up of a division of the High Court on corruption and economic crimes, with a view to ensure that we have the necessary institutional framework to sustain this war against corruption. And to that end, we will review the legal and institutional framework on customs and border protection. Again, in the meantime, I've also directed the Head of Public Service to ensure that all staff working in the Kenya Revenue Authority, Customs and Immigration Departments to undergo integrity and competency vetting by an independent multi-agency vetting mechanism. In order to streamline government and thereby also reduce opportunities for theft and wastage, we will also immediately enact the Parastatal Reform Bill. This is the least that we can do to reflect the prudence that the Constitution enforces upon us. Last Friday, as some of you may be aware, the Attorney General presented me with the recommendations by the Task Force on Review of the Legal Policy and Institutional Framework for Fighting Corruption in Kenya that I called for last March during the State of Nation Address. I have directed him today to immediately follow up the implementation of the recommendations made, particularly prioritizing those that will ensure we fulfill our goal of building strong cases, achieving convictions. Within government, I will lead a national coordinated effort bringing together Parliament, the judiciary, the devolved governments, the Department of Public Prosecutions, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the Asset Recovery Agency, and the Financial Reporting Center to reverse perverse incentives that lead to corruption and closing the loopholes that dishonest individuals use to steal, as well as to tighten our legislation work to improve our investigations and prosecutions. We are also directing that with immediate effect, no public goods and supplies will be procured at prices above the prevailing market prices by any public agency at the national and county level. The Public Procurement Oversight Authority shall henceforth publish its periodical price reference list for goods and services. I am also directing that PPOA to provide to my office a compliance report on this directive once a quarter for action in accordance with Article 2265 of our Constitution. Delay in governments making payment for goods and services it has received plays a big part in creating incentives for bribery and rent seeking. So today we're also announcing that every accounting officer shall be held responsible for ensuring that all payments for goods and services are paid in a timely manner as prescribed in the supply contracts. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the Criminal Investigation Department, as well as the Asset Recovery Agency, which we are operationalizing immediately, will institute proceedings to recover monies from companies that through collusion with public officials supplied above price reference lists. On the other hand, private sector vendors who do not deliver on time or deliver substandard goods will be penalized and barred from any future supply of government goods and services. Kenya, as we all know, has very high standard of quality of people in IT, and we want to tap on this homegrown talent to develop accessible technology platforms. And I call upon today our Kenyan innovators to develop accessible technology platforms that allow citizens and customers to report bribe demands, inordinate service delays, and corrupt practices in government departments. The data produced by these diligent young people will be published and available to the presidency to hold responsible officers to account. We have also stated as a government that all accounting officers, AIE holders, and supply chain officers will be held personally liable for approving or allowing any supply of goods and services with companies that have been barred. Hiyo tumesema. We're also directing that where any public officer has through their actions or inactions caused loss of public resources, that a surcharge of the said public officer in accordance with Article 2265, 201D, and 232B of the Constitution be done. Any individual director or corporate entity from the private sector who aids, abets, or participates in supply of goods and services in violation of Articles 201D, 2265, and 232B shall be subject to proceedings to recover any loss of public funds, and they shall be liable for every available criminal sanction and shall be debarred, as I said earlier, from participation in public procurement for a period of 5 years. I am also directing the Chief of Staff and Head of Public Service to oversee the integration of all government digitization to allow for cross-referencing between various government databases and to facilitate multi-locational access by enforcement officers. Indeed, it has come to light that the designs of plans and budgets is increasingly becoming vendor-driven. I believe that now the time has come for us to separate the planners and budgeters from the implementers and spenders. To this end, today I have tasked the Chief of Staff and Head of Public Service to design an Office of Management and Budget under the Presidency. The Presidency will produce a President's budget working with the Parliamentary Budget Office, and this will ensure that we drive priorities, oversight, and reduce influence peddling in budgeting while ministries and departments concentrate on implementation and service delivery. I am of the mind, fellow Kenyans, that we in government should take better care of your money before we ask you for your taxes, and we are therefore going to insist that we have no increase in the overall government tax in the next financial year. I direct every state agency seeking to increase its tax must demonstrate to my office the need for the change and the commensurate benefits, for example, NHIF and their new rates. In the past, my government has issued some of the policy statements that I have announced. I must state that we have not been satisfied with a lot of the implementation, partly in regard to poor coordination and red tape involved in implementing a new constitutional dispensation. For this reason, and from now henceforth, the head of public service will be reporting to me on a weekly basis on progress in implementing the measures that we have announced today. I believe that corruption is a standing threat to our national security. The bribe accepted by an official can lead to a successful terrorist attack that kills Kenyans, and it can let a criminal off the hook for them to return to criminal harming of Kenyans. Terrorism itself continues to be a national security threat. The damage to our economy put millions of lives at peril and undermines our very aspirations as a nation. Therefore, in conjunction, we are declaring with immediate effect corruption as a national security threat, and I direct that all security agencies, the Ethics, Anti-Corruption Commission, the Asset Recovery Agency, and the Financial Reporting Center to take cognizance of this. And indeed, last Friday, I nominated the chairperson and members of the EACC, and I have transmitted their names to the National Assembly for vetting. The National Intelligence Service should pursue information and intelligence on corruption and bring it to my attention and to the attention of the relevant investigating and prosecuting bodies. The National Security Advisory Committee, therefore, is instructed to add corruption, particularly that which impacts security, in its agenda and advise the National Security Council as required. I want to lastly again urge the DPP, the EACC, the judiciary, parliament, and the private sector, as well as religious leaders and all Kenyans, including government officials, to rally around our path of transformation. The only way we will make it to Vision 2030 and beyond as a prosperous, secure, and dignified nation is for us to relentlessly fight the evils that are abuse of office, fraud, bribery, and wastage. We as a country can win this fight, not least because Kenyans, for the first time in decades, have strong tools to demand accountability. The Constitution we passed has provided for ample provisions which, when implemented, not only in letter but in spirit, hold public officials and indeed all 40 million of us to account. We will, my friends, make it expensive for anyone stealing from Kenyans and denying them education, health, security, the infrastructure, and other services that they work so hard to receive from their government. I therefore today call on every Kenyan to be the eyes, ears, and voice of this redoubled national effort. And my office will spearhead these actions and hold everybody I have mentioned today responsible to deliver on their part. I thank you. May God bless you, and may God bless Kenya. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.